In a world where over 40% of urban flash floods strike with little to no warning, modern communities are constantly on edge, facing unpredictable threats that can disrupt lives and devastate economies. The lack of accurate real time weather prediction doesn't just challenge urban areas, it's a global issue. The agricultural sector, which feeds billions, suffers immensely from this unpredictability, losing an estimated 16% of global crop production every year, simply due to unexpected weather events. And the problem is growing. With climate change intensifying weather patterns, the frequency and severity of such events are only set to increase, pushing our already strained systems to the very brink. Hello, I am your host, Mike Lake, and in today's episode of Preview of Tomorrow, I will be talking with Jason Deese, founder of Flash Weather AI, a revolutionary company that's setting a new standard for weather prediction.
Innovation, resiliency, discovery. Join Mike Lake, President and CEO of Leading Cities, as we explore the technologies shaping the possibilities of our future with a preview of tomorrow.
Hello and welcome, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us, and of course, welcome to all of you, our listeners. I'm excited to introduce you today to Jason Deese. He's the founder of Flash Weather AI, a company pioneering the next generation of weather prediction technology. Jason, I got to ask you, how were you motivated to focus all your work and effort on addressing this critical issue, but often probably overlooked and taken for granted topic of improving weather predictability?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk on the podcast today, Michael. But yeah, I'm a career research meteorologist, so sort of a science nerd. Spent my entire career with the National Weather Service, putting out tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, and serving the public with all of those very needed watches and warnings and life-saving products. But it was during that time period, there wasn't really any change going on within the weather industry. And so, during that time also, we would get requests for lightning strikes, tell us when lightning was going to develop, tell us when it was going to end, from, I don't care if it was the emergency manager with the government down to the mom with her kid at the pool, 4th of July celebrations, you name it. And those were answers, believe it or not, that we didn't have and that the private sector didn't have. And so, because the weather industry had become a little bit stale in terms of their development, we really didn't have the tools necessary to accurately predict when and where lightning would occur, or some of these other parameters as accurately as we wanted to.
And I mean, it's something I think we all pay attention to, right? Everybody, or at least here in New England where I am, you have to look at the weather every day because it's constantly changing. Although I always joke that weather prediction up here can't get yesterday's weather right because it changes so frequently. But
Right.
I think the majority of people will tend to look at a weather report, and get a sense whether it's planning their clothing for the day or gardening or whatever it might be. But the impact of weather is, as we are seeing, is becoming more intense, more frequent, and it's not just about do I need an umbrella or not. This is about protecting industries. It's about protecting people, and there's been such a rise in the number of storms that we see just in the U.S. alone. I know a couple of years ago we saw 20 separate billion-dollar plus weather and climate disasters, from wildfires and hurricanes to just severe storms, and it cost over $145 billion. I mean, this is real money we're talking about here. So
Right.
when we're talking about weather, it's not just about that, trying to keep your head dry when you're outside.
Right.
It's much more important than that. Can you tell us a little bit about really what is the weather industry?
Sure. I mean, regardless of how you feel about it, I mean, the impacts of climate change are real, and it's not something that's happening, 30 years into the future. It's occurring now. And so that's one of the things that we focused in as a company is solving some of those issues now. But it's not just from, what you talked about and a monetary standpoint, but the number of events are increasing and the cost of those events are increasing. So the combination of those two, we're seeing more wildfires, we're seeing stronger storms, the frequency of storms is increasing. And then longer term, when we just talk about lightning, we're looking at lightning increasing by 50% in some parts of the world by 2100. So the fact that some of these already very costly events are already occurring more frequently, and we're expecting that to even increase into the future, it really begs the question, what are we doing to solve the issues today? We can't wait 30 years down the road to start addressing these issues. We need to start looking now.
And so not surprisingly, here at Leading Cities, we focus a lot on cities, and I know cities are particularly susceptible to things like flash floods due to urban heat island, lack of ability to absorb that rainwater. By the way, that also causes issues with rainwater filling the sewer system and creating pollution issues. All of this is obviously exacerbated by serious weather events. Despite some advances, many urban areas still receive insufficient warning times for flash floods, and that also leads to billions of dollars in damages annually. What has happened in the technology? You referenced the technology. What has happened over the course of, however, the last 100 years to better prepare us, if anything?
Sure. That's one of the reasons why, flash weather AI, which we'll talk about more hopefully later on, that's one of the reasons why it was started, is because of the stagnation in portions of the weather industry. So I'll give you an example. 30 years ago, it took 6 hours to get a new hurricane forecast. Today, it takes 6 hours to get a new hurricane forecast. That's because we're using the same computer models, although they've improved and they're giving more accuracy, but those computer models take time to run. So even, the consumer with their app on their phone and they're looking at the forecast on there and they're thinking it says rain's going to start in 20 minutes. Many of those apps are updating only once an hour. And so the life cycle of a typical thunderstorm is less than an hour. So you're going to miss those events. And so it's really about coming up with a new way of thinking about how can we forecast more timely and not wait 1 hour, 6 hours to make a new forecast, because that's really the distinction in where the accuracy comes from and being able to increase our accuracy. So you're right. The big cities, they seem to have the most impact for sure. And it's not just about, the warnings for these cities and, the flash flooding and, they have the infrastructure that's affected, but there's also a demographic portion of this. Dr. Marshall Shepard with the University of Georgia has done a lot of good work on this and talking about some of the underserved communities that are within cities. They're not getting the warnings as quickly as they should so that they can take the actions that they need. And so there's two parts to this. It's about for everybody getting the warnings out there in a more timely manner, but then also from a social science perspective, getting those messaging out to everyone. So Flash Weather AI is going to be working on both aspects of those.
Well, I want to touch on that real quickly, and let's shift to Flash Weather AI. But when we talk about the impact to cities, at least I think about, the inconvenience of getting wet in a rainstorm that you weren't expecting.
Right.
You think of issues of flooding and the damage that can cause, or down trees or loss of electricity or whatever it might be, all those inconveniences and sometimes serious damages. But there is also a loss of life. Over 400 people die annually due to the inaccuracy of weather prediction, or the untimeliness of weather predictions. And I know over 7 days, it's like 50% accuracy rate for traditional technology. And I know another study showed that, for using traditional methods, they failed to predict severe weather storms accurately about 23% of the time. That's a big gap. So how is Flash Weather AI solving that challenge?
Sure. So, one of the aspects that we talk about is what we do in terms of our forecasting is combining AI with traditional algorithms to forecast much quicker. And so instead of those 6 hours and 1 hour forecast, we only take 2 minutes before we issue a new forecast. So every 2 minutes, we're issuing a new forecast so that we're not going to miss those big events. But that's only part of the equation. The other part is you have to focus on the impacts of the weather. And so that's what really affects these big cities. And so, I remember an event up in Boston, I think where you are, many, many years ago. There was a snow that occurred it was just a typical 3-inch snow. Boston wouldn't see anything from a 3-inch snow. They wouldn't care about that, right? Well, it happened in the fall when the leaves were still out on the trees. And so the snow on the leaves took all the tree branches down, which fell on the power lines, which caused outages over the city for weeks. So, it's on us as weather providers to not only tell you, that it's going to be a 3-inch snow, but what the impact of that 3-inch snow is going to be, because they're not all created equally. So there's this weather intelligence portion of, getting the right information to the consumer, so severe thunderstorm warning. If you got a severe thunderstorm warning on your phone, you say, oh, there's a severe thunderstorm warning for Chatham County. Well, where am I in Chatham County right now? How is this thunderstorm going to affect me? So we need different ways, which we're looking into, of pinpointing exactly where the thunderstorms are, where the consumer is, where you need to be, where you need to go, so that you can seek safety. So it's all about this weather intelligence and not just about the accurate weather forecasting.
I was, as you were talking, I was thinking about the many different applications to this. So what, and what, I wasn't thinking this initially, but sporting events. I'm looking at the painting behind you, which I feel like a golf club might be missing from what I can see there. But sticking straight up in the air is a nice long metal stick here in the middle of a thunderstorm or a lightning storm. Not a good place to be. But what are the applications that this can really impact?
Sure. From our perspective, when we started looking at it, it was anything outdoors. And so, we really needed to narrow that from a business perspective and, look at what we wanted to focus on. Obviously, youth sports is a huge one that we're looking at, but also the golf industry. We're working with Golf Genius to take our technology to 10,000 golf courses out there. And it's not just about the safety aspect, Michael, but it's about the efficiency aspect. So, it's getting the golfers safe inside, but also there's this impact of knowing when lightning's coming ahead of time, knowing when severe thunderstorms are coming ahead of time. We have a golf course that actually will go to the clubhouse and say, get all the wings and beer you can ready. We've got 150 golfers coming in 45 minutes, because now they know that severe weather lightning is coming. And so it's about being proactive rather than reactive. So there's certainly the safety component, which is what Flash Weather AI was built on, but we're finding out there's this economic component as well that's just as big for some of these areas that we're targeting. But yeah, youth sports. We did a blog just a couple of weeks ago on a Kalispell, Montana lightning strike. It happened at a soccer field up there. Unfortunately, there were a coach and 2 of the players were struck by lightning, one in ICU. A tragic case, but it was a case where seemingly the coaches did everything right. They were using the 30-minute rule, which is wait 30 minutes for the last rumble of thunder. But unfortunately, these are archaic rules, and you can have another thunderstorm develop at minute 31 just as easy. And so, with our technology, we're trying to get out there and say, what actually is the threat? Where is the lightning? When are you truly safe to go back out? And so those are the things that are really going to change things for youth sports and the youth and anything outdoor as far as recreation is concerned, being proactive rather than reactive.
And beyond lightning, I know there's a discussion happening here locally about when to allow students out into the playground for recess, if it's too hot, right. For instance, not just lightning as a threat, although both. Does Flash Weather AI work with the heat side of things as well?
We do. I'm glad you asked that question. So we just recently to our dashboards, we've added wet bulb globe temperature, which is a more accurate representation of the heat threat than what heat index is. And so wet bulb globe temperature, along with our heat risk maps that we've included in our dashboard as well. It actually will take what the heat risk is based in a city, and it will just tell you whether it's minor, moderate, major, and extreme. And this is what I'm talking about messaging. If I tell you the wet bulb low temperature today is going to be 85 in St. Louis, Missouri, I don't know, that may mean something to you, it may not, but if I tell you the heat risk today in Missouri is going to be extreme, then okay, I need to get my students in. We need to move the practices 2 hours ahead. So, we're telling you what the wet bulb low temperature is currently. We're telling you what the forecast is for the next 7 days so that you can plan more accurately for those heat risks. We'll be doing the same thing with winter weather. We're going to have a winter weather risk on our dashboard, and it'll tell you, whether it's minor, moderate, major, or extreme event. And again, it takes into account those factors of impact. And so, yeah, this is just going to be a 2-inch snow, but the surface road temperature is going to be 28 degrees, falling to 25 degrees. So we're going to have ice, making this an extreme event. So making it just really easy to look at one image and say, okay, we have extreme weather today. Let's take action.
And as you're talking, I can imagine where in the agricultural industry, people want to know and they would want access to this dashboard. Certainly sporting events, things like that. But being biased to the work that we do at Leading Cities, if I'm a mayor right now, why am I thinking that my city needs flash weather AI, and how would it use it?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of like that political adage, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? So think about how the weather's worked for you in the past. Have you had missed events? Have you had major episodes that you didn't know were coming or that you thought were coming and didn't happen? And all of those were the result basically of inadequate computer modeling that updates once every 6 hours or more. And so now Flash Weather AI comes along, we're updating every 2 minutes. So we're going to miss a lot less of those events, and we're going to identify those events that some of those other weather technologies are not going to see. And so, if cities run fast and they change fast. And so you need something that updates fast and is going to give you those rapid weather updates to let you know what's going on so you can take those quick actions. And again, proactive rather than reactive. I'll keep stating that. And that's really what Flash Weather and AI enables these cities to do.
And that would be, the school system knowing whether or not to close a school or early release, or the public works or transportation departments to plan salting or plowing or shutting streets down or whatever it might be, or emergency response to be prepared for, a response if necessary.
Sure. And then the heat that you mentioned before, we've heard the stories going on down in Texas before, in Dallas, and some of the heat related issues and the strain that puts on the utility systems, excuse me, down there. So it creates real, not only safety impacts, if you can't allow the utility to generate air conditioning for these much needed areas, but then also an economic impact for those as well. So yeah, there's wildfires, out in some of these cities, and we saw some, roar through Gatlinburg, Tennessee a few years ago, but also some of these other cities are going to be threatened by areas that are outside of the city but could move into the city just because the wildfire threat is increasing. Well, we can see where those lightning strikes are going to occur ahead of time, let them know where they're going to go and get to the fire sooner so we can put them out sooner. So yeah, it really runs across a variety of sectors that we're going to be impacting with our new technology.
And what level of accuracy are you predicting these events?
Yeah, so our Lightning product is up to a 99.6% accuracy. In some cases, but we're updating every 2 minutes, so that's why we're going to capture those events. And so it makes sense that our accuracy is going to be very high. There's some events, like Colorado, Florida, summertime, we're going to be less, we're going to be still greater than 80%, but we're providing the only lightning prediction tool that's out there that utilizes the AI and the algorithm portion. So utilizing that, we're going to be more accurate. We're going to be more accurate than any of those models that update 1 to 6 hours out for sure.
And how specific can you get in terms of lightning prediction?
Right. So, we always say Mother Nature is Mother Nature. And so there are these strikes from the blue that can occur, and a lot of those can occur 20 miles out, but the majority of lightning strikes will be within that thunderstorm. And so, we have an accuracy within a kilometer of the actual strike from the storm, and you really don't want to be any closer than, say, 3 kilometers to a storm anyway. And so us providing that 1 kilometer accuracy, we feel pretty good about telling you 45 minutes in advance that lightning's coming, telling you 15 minutes in advance that lightning's here. And then we send a final one that says, hey, the threat of lightning is over. You can continue your normal activities. So, we're going to be increasing that accuracy as well with these other products that we roll out. We're rolling out a hail product in 2 weeks. That'll be a 6-hour hail product that'll tell you where hail occurs. So you talked about agriculture. That's going to be huge for them, and knowing where hail occurs. Construction and roofing industries, knowing when hail is going to occur for these. And yeah, insurance is going to be all over that. And down to the consumer, if you see an alert on your phone that says large hail is coming to your city in 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour, pull your car into the garage, you just saved yourself quite the headache. So a lot of applications for what we're doing.
So I love to end each podcast with this, talking about predictions, but projecting into the future, 10, 50, 100 years from now, let's say 100 years from now, flash weather AI is the standard technology being used. What do you see as, that societal impact, whether it's on industry or individuals or cities, or whatever it is? What do you see that real impact materializing to be?
Okay, sure. I'll answer that by starting at the beginning of Flash. When I was talking to my friends who were tournament directors and umpires for my 4 kids, 2 girls who played softball, and I was telling them, what are you guys doing? You're making these horrible decisions about lightning. They shot back at me and they said, we're not meteorologists. We shouldn't be making these decisions. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. And so that's where Flash AI was born out of, was my desire to help them have the tools that they needed to be a meteorologist, or at least have a meteorologist, with them at all times. And so that's my vision for the future, Michael, is that, people don't want to be a meteorologist. They don't want to have to make these life critical decisions, whether it's a city mayor or whether it's the mom, like I said, with her kid at the pool. They don't want to have to make those decisions. So let's give them what we call a weather wingman, So everybody on their phone will have their weather wingman. They'll have their own meteorologist in their pocket, that can tell them exactly what's going to happen, and tell them with 2-minute updates, that a tornado is coming, hail is coming, strong winds are coming, hurricanes coming. All of those aspects will be right there on their phone, and they can actually trust what they're seeing.
I'm just thinking, as you're saying that, I do use my phone and open the certain weather app that I have downloaded on there. And I can't tell you the number of times I've looked at the precipitation map that it shows, and the 1 hour, and you can see this giant blue, purple, white, mass moving over. But you go to the 12-hour and there's no such mass anywhere. I think to myself, wait a minute. This is the same app giving me 2 very different answers on whether or not there's a storm coming. Right. So I, for one, can appreciate having, I like that, the weather wingman in my pocket that's giving me consistent and accurate information. Well, I'm sorry our time is up, because there's so much more we can cover. I mean, the impacts you just described just make me think so many more areas that are affected. I mean, none of us can escape the weather. So it impacts just about every aspect of our daily lives. So I want to thank you for joining us today on Preview of Tomorrow. And most importantly, I want to thank you for the work you're doing to make weather a more of a non-event, we'll call it, for all of us.
Right. Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the problems that are out there with weather forecasting and how we're solving them. So appreciate the time today.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Preview of Tomorrow. Listeners like you are essential to advancing our efforts to drive resiliency and sustainability for all. I ask that you give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever streaming platform you prefer. Your feedback helps us to grow and share these brief previews of what life in the future can be. In addition to thanking our guest today, I want to thank Peter Roy and Demetria Bridges for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and encourage others to also join us each week in previewing the possibilities of tomorrow.
Preview of Tomorrow is brought to you by Leading Cities, a global nonprofit driving resilience and sustainability for all by unleashing the potential of the world's cities. Join them at leadingcities.org.